The galaxy was never quiet and never still, for in every corner of the stars something moved, something grew, and something struggled to survive. And for a long time the many species believed that they had reached a balance of power and trade and knowledge, and that nothing truly new could rise to shake them. Yet the truth came as sudden as a storm when the crisis began. It started small on a farming moon in the Keeler sector, where crops turned black. In a single night the farmers cried out to their council, but no answer came, for the council thought it only a local plague. Then the same black rot appeared on another world, and then another, until whole shipments of food were lost before even leaving the ground, and slowly whispers spread of famine, spreading like fire across the stars. The Galactic Council held urgent meetings with voices raised and arguments echoing in the Grand Chamber. As each species demanded answers, the proud Valent scientists claimed it was a chemical spill, the silent Andrew believed it was a curse, the cold Zorith generals called for quarantine by fire, to burn whole worlds before the rot could move further. But none of their words brought a cure, and still the crisis grew. The media across the galaxy named it the Deathworld Crisis, for every planet touched by it seemed cursed, like Earth itself, a place the aliens had always called a death world, a world where storms could kill, seas could swallow, and beasts could strike with tooth and claw. And to the council this was the most fitting name for the spreading rot that ate life faster than war or flame. Across the stars people panicked, trade routes shut down, ships refused to land for fear of carrying the blight, markets collapsed, food grew scarce, riots broke out in cities of glass and steel, as once proud races found their stomachs empty and their power slipping. The galaxy trembled as no weapon could fight hunger, and no shield could keep it away. The crisis moved faster than fleets. It spread through spores unseen, tiny fragments carried by wind and by water and by trade. And though the greatest minds studied the soil and the sky, none found the root of it. Ships, equipped with endless scanners, searched for patterns, but only confusion returned, and the council began to fear that their age of power was ending. Among them was General Korvac of the Zorith, who spoke louder than all others, his scales gleaming under the chamber light. He roared that hesitation would kill them all. He demanded the council approve cleansing fire. He said, let us burn the infected planets before more fall. Yet even he could not ignore that more planets joined the list each week, faster than fleets could fly, and soon even Zorith worlds felt the shadow. The Andrews sat in silence, their long faces hidden under deep hoods, whispering of omens they read in their dust scrolls. They said the stars foretold a darkness rising that no warrior could kill and no machine could halt. Their words only deepened the fear, for no one wished to admit the truth, that the galaxy stood at the edge of starvation. Then one night in the chamber of the council, when the voices had grown hoarse from days of endless debate, a simple question rose from the youngest aide, a quiet voice asking, why not ask the humans? The hall went silent, as if the stars themselves had stopped shining. Many turned in disbelief. Many sneered in open laughter, for humans were the fragile ones, the reckless death world species, who broke bones from simple falls and caught sickness from mild air. Why call them? General Korvac struck the floor with his heavy tail, his laughter harsh and cruel. He said, call the humans, and they will break before the rot even touches them. Call them, and they will die faster than crops in the field. The chamber echoed with his scorn, and others joined in mocking the suggestion as madness. Yet not all laughed, for there were those who remembered other times when humans solved problems in strange ways. They remembered the way humans adapted on harsh colonies, and how they made homes in places other species avoided. They remembered wars where human tactics turned defeat into victory with tricks no one else would dare. And so the seed of the idea began to grow in the minds of the quiet few. Still the crisis did not wait. Entire sectors faced collapsed children when hungry leaders begged for help, and fleets grew restless, for even the strongest weapon could not create bread. And so at last the council voted with heavy shame. They would send for Earth. The message left the chamber on a beam of light, crossing stars and dust, carrying with it both desperation and disbelief, calling on the weakest race to save the strongest civilizations. And though many mocked it as foolishness, none could deny that no other hope remained. In the dark that followed, ships drifted in orbit over dying worlds. Farmers watched their fields turn to ash. Traders counted empty crates. Leaders whispered of riots soon to come. And the people of the galaxy waited with fear in their hearts, wondering if the fragile humans would answer, and if they did, whether such fragile beings could stand against a crisis that seemed born from the heart of death itself. The message from the Galactic Council traveled through the void carried by beams of light and whispering code, and though many alien races scoffed at the idea of calling on Earth the message, still reached the blue planet, the humans read it with steady eyes and quiet hearts, for they were no strangers to desperation. They had lived with famine and plague and war across their own history, and they had always found a way to endure when others thought all was lost. The council chamber waited in tension days later as a ship, unlike the grand vessels of the other races, approached the station. It was smaller, patched together from metal that looked worn by storms and fire, yet it carried itself with confidence, as though the scars of its surface told stories of survival rather than weakness. The docking clamps locked with a hiss, and out stepped a group of humans dressed not in gold robes or crystal armor but in simple suits, practical and plain. The council members stared, some with amusement, some with scorn, some with faint unease, for the humans were smaller than the towering Valen and thinner than the armored Zorith. They looked fragile against the shimmering scales and iron hides of the council races, but their eyes were steady, calm, unshaken by the stares of beings who considered themselves gods among stars. At the head of the human group walked Dr. Elena Marrow, a woman with hair pulled tight and eyes that carried storms within them. She did not bow, she did not kneel, she simply stood and listened as the council presented the crisis with charts and endless streams of data. And when the voices of the council grew loud again with blame and fear, she raised her hand, and silence spread across the hall. The Zorith General Korvac sneered, his tail lashing against the polished stone floor. His voice was sharp as blades when he said, "You expect these soft creatures to save us? Look at them, their bones break and gravity shifts, their skin burns under 2 suns, their lives are short as sparks in the dark. What can they give but failure?" The humans did not answer with anger. They did not strike back with loud words. Instead, they asked questions, simple questions. Why do the crops blacken so quickly? What is the soil made of? What are the winds carrying? How do the spores move? Where do the trade routes cross? And why were some worlds hit before others? The council scientists blinked at the simplicity of it, for they had already drowned themselves in equations and simulations, yet none had asked in such plain words. Dr. Marrow walked to the projection of a dying world. She touched the image of blackened fields and asked, how deep do the roots fall? What insects lived here before the rot arrived? What did the rivers carry last season? Her voice calm, her tone steady, as if she were teaching children in a quiet room. Some of the council took it as insult, others as ignorance, but the humans kept working, taking notes by hand while alien computers spun in confusion. The human team moved quickly. They gathered soil samples from ships. They studied food shipments with small tools that looked almost primitive compared to the shining devices of the Valen and the humming scanners of the Andrew. But their tools were enough, for they knew where to look, they knew how to test. And when alien experts saw chaos, the humans saw patterns, faint and thin, but clear to eyes trained by centuries of struggle on a world that tried to kill them every day. One evening in the chamber, as alien delegates argued for quarantine or war, the human biologist Daniel Kess leaned back in his chair, scribbling on a pad with an old pen. He smiled, a faint smile that angered the Zorith General Korvac. The general slammed his clawed hand on the table, demanding to know why he smiled when worlds were burning. Daniel replied with words that silenced even the laughter. He said, "This looks like homework from our biology classes." The chamber erupted in outrage. The Andrew called it arrogance. The Valen muttered of disrespect. The Zorith general roared with fury. But the humans did not waver, for Daniel kept writing notes, drawing sketches of fungal spores, and tracing arrows of trade routes, like a puzzle child might solve on a rainy afternoon. The council saw only insult, yet in truth the humans had begun to see the heart of the crisis. Dr. Marrow explained to the few who would listen that Earth was a death world, not because it killed the weak, but because it trained the survivors. Every disease, every famine, every storm had carved a lesson into the human mind, and that lesson was this: nothing is unsolvable, nothing is beyond reason. If you are willing to look closely enough, she said, the soil of dying worlds tells a story. You only need to listen. Korvac spat fire with his words, mocking her, saying, "Children might notice. What adults overlook is that your wisdom, child." Yet her calm reply struck deeper than any weapon. She said, "Sometimes children survive where warriors fall, and sometimes simple questions open doors your machines cannot find." The council fell silent as her words echoed across the chamber. While the aliens argued, the humans worked through nights Without sleep, their simple equipment spread across tables, their hands stained with soil samples, their notes scattered. Like leaves, they compared patterns of spore growth with maps of trade. They charted winds. With disease spread, they found connections that the brightest alien computers had missed, and slowly the shape of the truth emerged before them. The humans discovered that the rot was not random. It was a living organism, a fungal spore spreading through hidden cracks of commerce, and travel it rode in the holds of ships, carried by water and air unnoticed, because it masked itself against scanners. But to human eyes trained to see simple truths, it was clear like ink on white paper. The council gathered once more as the humans presented their findings. Dr. Marrow spoke with no pride and no arrogance. She showed the spores under a microscope. She showed the trade maps that revealed the path of infection. She showed the simple tests that proved what it was, and for the first time in months silence filled the chamber, not the silence of argument, but the silence of understanding. Some felt awe, some felt shame, some felt fear that fragile humans had seen what no empire mind could see. General Korvac growled low, his pride bleeding into rage, yet even he could not deny the truth, for the spores were there, visible, undeniable. His claws scraped the table as he muttered words the council would never forget. Perhaps the children were right after all. The humans did not celebrate. They did not mock, they only asked for permission to try a cure. They spoke of minerals and mixtures common across the galaxy, elements so ordinary that no scientist had thought to combine them. They asked for patience and trust, though few were willing to give it, yet no other path remained, and so the council allowed them to continue. Thus the humans began their true work, not as warriors, not as conquerors, but as problem solvers with pens and samples and steady patience. And while the galaxy watched with doubt and fear, the humans saw not a Deathworld Crisis, but a puzzle waiting to be solved. The galaxy believed that knowledge lived in the hands of the great empires, with their crystal archives and endless machines. Yet when the humans arrived, they carried no glowing devices of wonder, no vast ships filled with humming servers. They carried, instead, small boxes of tools, old pens, worn notebooks, and minds sharpened by the long struggle of survival on Earth. And while alien scholars sneered at such simplicity, the humans began to see what others had missed. Dr. Elena Marrow stood in the dim chamber of the station, bending over a microscope she carried with her from Earth, her fingers adjusting the glass with practiced care, her eyes never blinking, as she studied the black dust of the spores. Daniel Kess sat beside her, drawing the shapes on paper, sketching every curve, every branch of the fungus with quick strokes and whispering thoughts. As he drew, they look alive. They look like they are speaking with each other. The alien scientists nearby frowned, for to them it was madness to speak of fungus as if it whispered, yet Elena nodded, for she knew he was right. Humans were not afraid to imagine, even when others mocked them. They asked questions so small and so plain that alien minds thought them childish. But these small questions were the ones that opened doors. Elena asked, "What does the soil smell like when the rot begins?" Daniel asked, "What birds vanish first when the crops fall?" A third scientist from Earth, a quiet man named Raj, asked, "What color does the water become before it dies?" Each question seemed foolish to the proud minds of the Valen or the cold generals of the Zorith, yet in the answers lay patterns that glittered like stars in the dark. At night, when the council chamber emptied of shouts and threats, the humans stayed bent over their tables, their lamps glowing soft as they traced paths across maps of the galaxy. They marked where the spores appeared first, where they spread next, where trade routes overlapped, where winds carried dust, and where rivers poured into oceans. Their hands moved in quiet rhythm, their faces tired, yet filled with determination. The work looked simple to alien eyes, but to the humans it was a puzzle unfolding like an old story. Daniel lifted his head one night, a smile spreading across his face, though his eyes were red from sleepless hours. He said, "It is all too familiar. I saw this before in school, when we studied blights on Earth, when crops fell to fungi, and whole villages feared famine. Yet we solved it with mixtures. We solved it with patience. This is the same, only larger." Elena placed her hand on the table and whispered softly, "Yes, it is homework, only homework." The alien observers hissed with anger, for to them the death of worlds was no lesson. It was a tragedy too great to be compared to the play of students. Yet the humans did not mean insult. They meant only that they recognized the shape of the enemy. Earth had trained them well. Every plague, every drought, every famine had carved scars into their history, and those scars had turned into wisdom. Raj reminded them of the Great Famine centuries before, when human children starved in streets until new crops were discovered that could resist the rot. He reminded them of diseases that once killed millions until medicine turned the tide. He reminded them of storms that destroyed cities only for new walls and new homes to rise stronger than before. Each memory painful, each memory a lesson carved deep into human bones. The aliens could not understand this resilience. They lived long lives with comfort and order. They had forgotten hunger, they had forgotten sickness, they had forgotten storms, for their worlds had been made safe by machines long ago. But Earth never gave such comfort. Earth demanded struggle every season, every year, and in that endless struggle humans learned not to surrender, not to despair, but to search always for a path, no matter how small. As the days passed, the humans began to connect the threads. The spores grew faster, in damp soil slower, in dry sand they thrived where rivers carried minerals. They weakened under certain salts. Elena noted that trade ships carrying grain showed higher infection than ships carrying metal. Daniel noticed that spores survived longer in cold storage than in warm halls. Raj discovered that the fungus produced faint heat when crowded together, as if alive, as if building colonies. Each detail was written in notebooks, their pages filled with sketches and simple lines, nothing elegant, nothing grand, yet together they built a picture clearer than the vast alien databases the Council had relied on before. And when the humans finally showed the pattern to the Council, the silence was heavy like stone in the chamber. Dr. Marrow spoke with calm words. She said, "The spores are not random. They are fungus. They ride your ships. Through trade they hide in soil and water. They move like shadows, because your scanners look for signals and machines and metals, but not for life. So small they are simple, but they are deadly if ignored." The Council erupted once more, voices clashing like thunder. Some cried the humans lied, some shouted that their explanation was too simple to explain the crisis, some demanded more proof. But Elena only placed a single slide of soil beneath her old microscope. She invited them to look one by one, and when they did they saw the truth, the spores shaped like branching claws multiplying in the dark plain, and undeniable. Korvac, the Zorith general, growled deep, his pride bleeding into anger. He spat that such a tiny thing could not bring empires to their knees. Yet even his words shook, for in his heart he knew it was true. The galaxy had been humbled, not by a mighty army, not by a weapon forge of stars, but by a fungus so small it could sit on the tip of a claw unseen, until humans pointed it out. The humans did not boast, they did not shout. They simply worked on in silence, preparing notes for a cure. And while they worked, the aliens whispered among themselves. Some felt awe, some felt shame, some felt fear. For if humans could solve this with ease, what else might they see? What else might they change with their strange way of thinking? Late that night, Daniel leaned over his notebook, his eyes heavy, yet his voice filled with quiet certainty. He whispered to Elena, "We will solve this, we always do, because Earth trained us for this. It trained us to look at monsters and call them puzzles." Elena nodded and whispered back, "Yes, the galaxy calls it Deathworld Crisis, but to us it is only another lesson." And so the humans continued their work, simple and steady, while the galaxy trembled, while riots spread on hungry worlds, while leaders argued and generals raged. The humans bent over their microscopes and maps and notes, solving a crisis that looked to them like nothing more than homework, while the fate of countless civilizations rested on the quiet persistence of fragile beings who refused to surrender. The council chamber grew heavier with every meeting as the voices of proud empires rose and clashed against the calm words of the human team. The air shimmered with tension like storms held back by fragile walls. The Zorith general Korvac towered above the humans, his scales glowing under the chamber light, his tail striking the floor with sharp cracks as he mocked the small group of visitors. He called them children lost in a war of giants. He declared that they played with dirt and notes while entire worlds died. Yet the humans did not flinch. They did not match his fury with fury. They listened with quiet patience as he roared, and when the echoes of his voice faded, Dr. Elena Marrow spoke in a tone softer than rain. She said, "Sometimes children see what warriors ignore. Sometimes a question so simple can guide the way." Her words carried no challenge, no pride, only steady truth. Yet they cut deeper than any weapon. The council fell silent for a breath, as if stunned by the weight of calm. Daniel Kess leaned forward, his notebook open before him, his hands blackened with soil stains. He said, "We see the fungus. We see the routes it takes. We see where it thrives. And where it weakens, you call it Deathworld Crisis. We call it a problem, with steps a puzzle, to solve like lessons given to students. Your machines search too high. For answers, you forget to look low beneath your own feet. Korvac snarled, his fangs bared, his pride burning at the thought that humans dared to speak, as if they understood more than empires older than human fire. He spat. You insult us. You compare the death of worlds to games of children. Your words, our arrogance, your weakness. Is clear. You cannot save us with chalk and scribbles. You cannot fight rot with paper. But the humans did not rise to meet his scorn. They returned to their work, their hands steady, their eyes focused. Elena placed another slide under her old microscope. She gestured for the council to look. She said, look here. See the spores dividing. See how they spread in lines, not random lines, but paths following trade ships, like shadows across the stars. They are simple creatures. They do not plan, but they follow what you give them. The Andrew Seers whispered among themselves, their voices like dry leaves. They said, the humans speak with strange wisdom. They speak with patterns of earth and sky that we did not see. The Valen scientists bristled, their pride wounded, that their grand machines failed while the fragile humans saw what they could not. They muttered of chance and luck, refusing to admit weakness, but their eyes betrayed unease. The chamber filled with arguments, once more aliens shouting of fire, quarantines, war, and sacrifice, while the humans worked quietly at their table. Raj drew maps with a steady hand, marking points where infection began, where it spread, where it slowed, his voice calm, as he explained that the fungus thrived best in worlds with high humidity and weak mineral balance. He said, give us time, and we will find what breaks it. Korvac roared again, his claws scraping the floor. He shouted, time is what we do not have. Every hour worlds fall, every hour children starve, and you speak of patience, while you play with mud. Elena turned her head slowly, her gaze steady as stone. She said, you burned worlds. Before you understood them, you brought ruin, with fire, thinking it safety. But fire does not cure hunger, it only deepens it. We are not here to burn, we are here to heal. Her words carried across the chamber, soft yet unshakable, and for a moment even Korvac could not find an answer. The weight of her calm pressed against his fury, and the other delegates began to wonder if perhaps the humans truly saw what they could not. That night, as the chamber emptied, Korvac remained, his eyes on the human table. He watched them work, their heads bent, their voices low. He could not understand their patience. He could not understand how such fragile beings faced despair with steady hands. Yet he felt the stir of something new, not respect, not yet, but a seed of doubt within his rage. The next day the humans revealed their first true finding. They showed that simple minerals from common rocks weakened the spores. They explained that the fungus consumed energy from certain salts, but choked when exposed to others. It was not a grand discovery to the council. It sounded absurd, too easy, too insulting. But the humans showed proof under microscopes, the spores withering before their eyes. The chamber shook with disbelief. Some called it trickery. Some demanded more trials. Some whispered of impossible simplicity. But Elena stood firm. She said, Earth taught us that sometimes survival rests on the smallest things, a grain, a drop, a seed. You see insult, we see hope. The Andrew leaned forward, their long fingers trembling. They whispered, perhaps the truth is always simple. Perhaps our pride blinded us. The Valen shouted that humans mock science, but even their voices held cracks of fear, for the evidence was there undeniable. Korvac slammed the table, his rage now mixed with unease. He said, if your cure fails, the galaxy will burn because of you. But if it succeeds, then everything we believed about strength is a lie. Elena met his eyes and said, strength is not in fire or steel. Strength is in finding answers. When all seems lost, we may be fragile, but we endure because we learn. The council fell into silence, broken only by the faint hum of machines. As the humans packed their samples, they worked without rest, preparing mixtures and tests, and though the aliens whispered doubts, they could not deny what their own eyes had seen. The fungus weakened before the simplest of minerals. Across the chamber corridors, aliens spoke in hushed tones. Some mocked the humans louder than before to hide their fear. Some admitted quietly that perhaps the galaxy had underestimated them for too long. And as the humans continued their work, the seeds of change began to grow in the hearts of those who once called them weak. That night Daniel looked out of the station window at the spread of stars, his voice soft, as he said, they see arrogance in us, but it is not arrogance, it is memory. We remember hunger, we remember plague, we remember when we thought the world would end, and it did not. Elena placed a hand on his shoulder and said, let them call us children, for children have always survived on Earth when the world tried to break them. And so the humans pressed on, calm against arrogance, steady against fury, patient against fear, while the galaxy watched with disbelief. While worlds starved and leaders, shouted the humans, saw only a puzzle with pieces waiting to be placed, and they would not stop until the picture was whole. The chamber of the council stood silent as the humans prepared their findings on long tables, their hands moving with quiet precision as they laid out jars of soil, vials of water, and small containers of minerals. There were no glowing crystals, no humming machines, only simple tools of glass and metal that looked crude against the shining devices of alien science. Yet the humans worked with steady focus, their eyes bright with purpose, while the delegates watched with scorn and doubt. Dr. Elena Merrill lifted a small vial filled with a pale powder, her voice calm and steady. She said, "This is calcium carbonate, common in stone and shell across countless worlds. When mixed with water and soil, it weakens the spores. It does not kill them alone, but it begins to break their growth." Then she lifted another vial, filled with a darker mineral. She said, "This is copper salt, a simple element found in rivers and mines. When applied to the spores, it burns their colonies, it leaves them broken." The aliens murmured in disbelief. The Valen scientists hissed that it was too simple, too basic to matter. The Zorath General Korvac roared that such childish claims wasted time, while worlds burned. But Elena ignored their anger. She placed both powders into a dish of infected soil before their eyes. As the council leaned closer, they watched the spores writhe and fade like shadows under sun. The rot withered in moments, leaving only pale dust behind. The chamber gasped, some in awe, some in rage, some in fear, for they could not deny what they saw. Raj spoke then, his voice quiet but firm. He said, "Earth taught us long ago that simple minerals can heal fields from blight. What you call worthless dust is life to us. What you ignore as common is the shield we used when famine came to our own world." Korvac snarled, pounding the table with his claw. He spat, "This cannot be true. No empire could fall to rocks and dirt. This is insult." Elena turned her gaze toward him, her eyes calm as the deep sea. She said, "It is not insult, it is truth. The spores are simple. They ride your ships, they eat your food, they follow your trade. But they are weak against what is most common. You built machines to scan for great threats, but forgot to look down at the ground beneath your feet." The Valen leader rose, his robes shimmering like fire. He declared, "This cannot be trusted. It is too small, too foolish to answer a crisis of galaxies." Yet another delegate, from the Andrew, spoke, their voice like wind through hollow stone. They said, "Perhaps the truth was always simple, and we were too proud to see it." The chamber broke into arguments, once more voices rising in chaos, while the humans stood silent, their evidence resting in plain sight. Daniel Kess opened his notebook, filled with sketches of spores collapsing under the minerals. He lifted it high and said, "We tested on 10 samples from 5 worlds. Every time the mixture weakened the spores, every time the fields began to heal. If you doubt, then send your own ships tested on your own soil. The proof will not change, because pride cannot change truth." The council sent samples to their ships' laboratories across the station, tested the mixture, and though many doubted, though many prayed it would fail, the results returned the same. Every time the spores weakened, the rot slowed, crops began to hold green once more, and the council chamber filled with uneasy silence as the truth settled heavy on their hearts. Korvac stood, his claws trembling with rage and shame, his voice lowered, yet still sharp. He said, "If this is true, then all our power means nothing. All our machines and armies could not see what these frail humans saw with dust and paper." Elena replied, "Strength is not in pride, it is in survival. Earth taught us that, and now you see why the galaxy called it a death world. It was not because Earth killed us, it was because it forced us to learn to endure." News spread across the stars faster than light. Fleets carried the simple cure minerals mixed into soil and rivers, common salts scattered across fields. Within days, dying worlds saw crops rise again. Within weeks, famine slowed and hope returned across the galaxy. People wept in streets, children laughed with food in their hands. Leaders stood in disbelief that the answer had been so close, so ordinary. Some alien races praised the humans openly, declaring them saviors. Others hid behind pride, claiming they had always suspected such a solution. Yet whispers filled the stars, whispers that fragile humans had seen what the mighty had missed, whispers that perhaps the weakest were not weak at all, but dangerous in their quiet, clever way. The Zorath soldiers who once mocked humanity lowered their heads in silence. Korvac himself stood before the human team, his pride bleeding away. As he spoke with heavy words, he said, "I called you children. I called you weak. I mocked your tools and your patience. Yet it was you who saved worlds, where warriors could not. You solved a crisis with what we called dirt, and you left us humbled." The humans did not smile, they did not raise their voices, they said, "We did what anyone should do. We looked, we listened, we asked questions you did not ask. There is no pride in saving lives, there is only duty." Elena added softly, "Earth taught us never to look away. When survival is at stake, it taught us that even the smallest tool can be the blade that cuts despair." Still some feared humanity, for if they could solve a crisis that broke empires, what else could they do with their strange minds? What else could they see that others could not? Their simplicity became mystery, their fragility became danger, their patience became power in the eyes of those who once laughed. As the last arguments faded, the council passed a decree. The cure would be spread across all worlds. The humans would be honored for their work, yet honor was not what mattered to them. They packed their tools, their notebooks, their worn microscope, ready to return to Earth. They said, "We only did what was needed. We only solved a puzzle, nothing more." But across the galaxy, nothing would be the same, for leaders lay awake at night asking themselves, if homework from Earth could save billions, what might happen when humanity turned their eyes toward greater threats? What might they discover? What might they build? What might they change? And so the crisis that once seemed to herald the end of the stars ended not with war, not with fire, not with grand machines, but with simple dust mixed by steady hands of humans who refused to surrender, while the galaxy watched with awe and unease. The message of the cure spread faster than the crisis itself. Ships carried vials of minerals to every corner of the stars. Fleets, once armed for war, now became convoys of soil and dust and salt, and rivers, once poisoned, now ran clean again. Fields, once black, now shone with green and gold, and the people of countless worlds looked up at the sky, whispering the name of the fragile beings who had saved them, the humans. In cities of glass, the Valens stood in their towers, ashamed of their pride. They had believed that only their machines could save the galaxy, yet the cure came from hands that used pens and notebooks. They watched their crops rise again, their children eat again, and they spoke quietly among themselves that perhaps pride was a heavier chain than hunger. On the frozen worlds of the Andrew, the seers gathered in their great halls, their voices, like dry winds, they read again their scrolls of prophecy. And they said the stars foretold a new balance. They said a small light would guide the great darkness away, and many believed the humans were that light, though the humans themselves denied such glory. Among the Zora soldiers there was unrest, for they had always seen strength in fire and blade. They had mocked the humans as weak prey unfit for war, yet now they bowed their heads in silence as they spread the simple cure across their farms and cities. General Korvac himself stood before his warriors and admitted that his rage had blinded him. He said, "We called them children, yet they saved our young with powders of stone. We called them weak, yet they endured where our power failed." Across the trade routes, merchants wept with relief. Their ships, once cursed, now free from spores. Markets filled again with food. Laughter returned to streets that had known only hunger. The common people praised the humans more loudly than any council, for it was their lives, their families, their children who had been saved, and to them humanity became not a fragile race, but a beacon. But not all felt gratitude in the same way. Some leaders whispered fear in secret halls. If humans could save billions with dust, what else might they do with their strange way of thinking? If they could see what no empire could see, if they could solve what no machine could solve, then perhaps they were not weak at all. Perhaps they were the most dangerous race of all, for danger does not always come with claws or fire. Sometimes it comes with quiet minds and steady hands. On the outer rim colonies, rumors spread like wildfire that the humans held secret knowledge, that they had let the crisis spread only to prove their worth. Others whispered that humans had no limits, that they could solve any puzzle, no matter how vast, and that one day they would use this gift not to save, but to rule. Fear walked beside respect, and the name of humanity grew heavy with mystery. In the council chamber the delegates argued again, but this time their arguments carried a new edge. Some demanded that humans be welcomed as equals, that they deserved a seat among the great powers. Others demanded restrictions, that humans be watched and contained, for their minds were too strange, their methods too unpredictable. Korvac spoke less now, his voice lower, but still sharp. He said, "They may be allies today, but tomorrow, who can say what puzzles they will solve? Puzzles we never wished solved." Dr. Elena Merrow heard these whispers, Yet she remained calm, her words always the same. We came only to help, we claim no throne we seek, no crown, we solved a puzzle, because it was there, and because life demanded it, nothing more. Daniel Kess added quietly, Earth has taught us hunger, Earth has taught us despair. We only gave you what we once needed ourselves. Still across the stars, young aliens turned their eyes to Earth. With new curiosity, students of the Valen began to copy human notebooks. Instead of grand machines, children of the Andrew asked teachers to explain simple questions as humans. Did young Zorith warriors whispered that patience might be a weapon as sharp as any claw. The galaxy had been shaken, not only by crisis, but by the strange lesson that fragility could hide the greatest strength. Fleets that once sailed with weapons now carried books written by humans, guides to farming, guides to disease control, guides filled with simple drawings and questions and step-by-step answers. Entire academies opened their doors to human teachers, though many elders grumbled, though many leaders resisted. The tide could not be held back, for the young were eager to learn, and they wanted to see the world through human eyes. Yet in the shadows fear still grew. Secret councils whispered of plans to limit Earth trade, to watch every human ship, to keep records of every human step. They spoke of humans as both saviors and threats, for they could not decide whether to thank or to fear them. In quiet corners of the galaxy, soldiers told stories of fragile humans who faced the death of worlds. With calm voices, merchants told stories of humans who turned famine to feast with dust and stone. Mothers told their children stories of humans who looked like prey but carried the hearts of hunters, and every story grew larger with each telling, until humanity became legend while still alive. Back on Earth, the human team returned to their home, their ship scarred from journeys, yet their hearts heavy with the weight of what they had seen. They did not see themselves as heroes. They said only, we solved what needed solving. We did not save the galaxy. We only answered a question that no one else wished to ask. But the galaxy did not hear their modesty. It heard only the echo of salvation. Daniel looked up at the stars one night, his voice soft, as he spoke to Elena. He said, they think us dangerous. Now she answered softly, maybe we are, but not in the way they fear. Danger is not always claws and steel. Sometimes it is the refusal to give up. Sometimes it is the will to keep asking questions until the truth shows itself. Raj added quietly, then let them fear, for that fear may keep them humble. And so the galaxy turned from famine to feast, from despair to survival. Yet it did not return to what it was before, for the image of humans had changed forever. They were no longer seen as fragile, no longer dismissed as weak. They had become the quiet race that solved the Deathworld Crisis like homework, and in doing so had shaken the pride of empires that thought themselves eternal. The galaxy healed with each passing cycle, as the simple cure spread from star to star. Fields grew green again, rivers cleared, and ships once heavy with despair now carried harvest and hope. Yet though the wounds of famine closed, new questions opened in the minds of the many species, for the cure came not from their ancient empires, nor from their great machines. It came from Earth, from the fragile race they had called weak and reckless, and that truth could not be forgotten. In the halls of the Galactic Council, new debates began. Some argued that humanity should be welcomed fully into the circle of power, given seats among the oldest races, for they had proven their worth beyond question. Others warned that humans were too strange, too unpredictable, that their methods defied logic and tradition, that they might one day unravel more than they saved. The chamber thundered with voices, each carrying awe or fear, yet in every voice humanity's name lingered like a shadow. Dr. Elena Merrow and her small team returned to Earth, carrying with them memories of hunger and salvation. They did not march home as heroes. They did not demand banners or songs. They simply returned to their quiet lives, their notebooks filled with sketches and answers, their voices calm as they told their people, we solved a puzzle, nothing more. Yet across the stars their names were whispered like legends. Elena, the calm; Daniel, the dreamer; Raj, the mapmaker. Their titles growing with each telling, as myths often do. Children of alien worlds drew pictures of humans in their school, small figures holding soil and light, while mighty empires bowed before them. Merchants told stories in markets of humans who carried wisdom in pockets and not in weapons. Soldiers spoke of humans who looked fragile yet stood firm against despair, and mothers told their children to be curious, as the humans were to ask small questions that might open great doors. Humanity had become not just a race but a lesson. On the world of Azoreth, the proud General Korvac walked among his people, his voice heavy with regret. He admitted to his warriors that strength was not always in claws and steel, that sometimes survival belonged to patience, and to calm hands he told them of the humans, who faced his scorn with silence, who answered his rage with questions, and who saved even the Zoreth young from famine. His words spread through his armies like fire, and though he remained a warrior, he spoke now of wisdom learned from those he once mocked. In the frozen temples of the Andrew the Seers, declared that the prophecy of a small light guiding the stars had come true. They spoke of humans as that light, a fragile flame that endured in storm and shadow. They sang songs of earth, a death world, turned cradle of endurance. Their young gathered to learn human ways of thought, asking questions of soil and sky, learning to look with simple eyes at mysteries that once seemed endless. Among the Valen scientists, pride cracked like broken glass. They had believed their machines perfect, their knowledge complete. Yet they had been blind where humans saw clearly, and though many resisted in silence, others embraced the lesson. They began to copy human methods, writing by hand, drawing simple maps, keeping notebooks filled with questions. Their academies changed slowly but surely, for the young no longer trusted pride, they trusted the curiosity of Earth. Back on Earth, humanity itself looked to the stars differently. They saw themselves no longer as fragile outsiders, but as part of something larger. They had stood before empires and shown that survival was not about power, but about persistence and patience. Stories spread across Earth of their place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as problem solvers, guardians of knowledge, and stubborn seekers of truth. Yet even as respect grew, so did fear. Secret councils of alien leaders whispered plans to watch the humans more closely, to limit their growth, to ensure that their strange thinking did not turn into threats. For they feared not human weapons, but human questions. They feared what puzzles humanity might solve next, what hidden truths they might reveal, truths that others wished remained buried. But humanity did not chase crowns, they did not demand thrones. They continued with quiet focus, building bridges, teaching their methods, sharing guides and notebooks across the stars. They sent simple books filled with drawings and step-by-step lessons to worlds that asked for help. They trained alien farmers in the way of Earth. They trained alien doctors in the way of patience. They spread knowledge as freely as air, and in doing so earned loyalty stronger than armies. In hidden corners of the galaxy, young students whispered dreams of traveling to Earth, to learn from its teachers, to walk its storms, to feel its trials. They no longer saw Earth as a cursed death world, but as a forge of resilience, a place that shaped beings who could endure anything. And the name of Earth became both feared and admired, carried in every tongue of the stars. Elena stood one evening at the edge of the sea, waves rising under the red sun of Earth. Daniel stood beside her, his voice soft, as he said, "They will never see us the same again." She nodded, her gaze on the horizon. She said, "They saw weakness, but weakness became strength. They saw fragility, but fragility became power. Now they see us as mystery, and that may be the greatest shield of all." Raj joined them, his voice low. He said, "Let them wonder, let them fear, let them admire, for we do not seek to rule only, to endure only, to solve." And so the legacy of humanity spread not in thunder or conquest, but in whispers and stories, in lessons passed from teacher to child, in notebooks carried from ship to ship. Humanity's greatest weapon was not steel nor fire, but the quiet refusal to surrender, the endless will to ask and to learn and to endure even when the world tried to break them. Across the galaxy, leaders trembled and citizens cheered, warriors bowed and children dreamed. The Deathworld Crisis had ended, but its mark would never fade, for it had revealed a truth that could not be hidden, the truth that the fragile beings of Earth had saved the stars as if solving simple homework, and in doing so had reshaped forever how the galaxy would see them.